Okay, everybody, this is Sheets, and I'm going to be doing the review of the four-game slate for this evening. I was going to do a lineup review of last night. We had a very successful evening last night, and I wanted to review the lineup construction from last night because we did have a plan that we talked about during the podcast review called this yesterday, and I did, executed it, and just wanted to show you the results from it. And again, not every lineup is going to work out. When you do multi-entry, by definition, a whole bunch of them are not going to work. But again, when you execute a plan, you at least have, something that you're rooting for, so to speak. So remember for yesterday, I had no problem kind of locking in or coming close to locking in Middleton and or Bledsoe. And what I did was I analyzed 4 different games that I really wanted to attack from a stack perspective, and I would work the core plays around them. So we went for the Bulls game, which was one stack, which didn't work out that well. Levine did, in fact, have 49 points, but the game blew out, so he didn't get to play the fourth quarter. And Jabari Parker, as you'll see, he did really, really poorly. And you'll see also I had 16% of Pat Connaughton, who was didn't play at all. So all those lineups went down the drain. The other stack that we kind of tried was this two-man with Isaac and LeBron, and that actually worked out okay. I mean, LeBron had 60, and Isaac just did okay. Actually, it was about 5x, which really isn't going to do it on a GPP slate. So that really didn't work out that well. The others that we did, there were 3 others. One was this Harden with the Kevin Love business or Kevin Love in general. And that worked out for a while. Kevin Love had 37 points going into the fourth quarter and then just couldn't quite do anything with it. Harden had 80, but unfortunately that took up too much salary. And Shetty Osman ended up with 0 points. And that's kind of the way it goes. And Bogdan Bogdanovic had 22. Again, so this really didn't get anywhere, although it did cash. The 2 stacks that did get places was the other 2 ideas that I had was attacking the Utah game. And the Utah game with Mitchell and Wiggins and Ingles and Gobert, I mean, this really, really did very, very well. So this produced a couple of really good results. The one that really smashed, though, was the last idea that we had was was stacking this Golden State New York game. And remember, we liked it because we thought it would be low owned and we knew exactly where the production was going to be coming from. And God forbid it would go to overtime, we'd really be in business, okay? And that's exactly what happened. Like this one got 3rd in the mini max, 7th in the shoot around, and 6th in this 20 max. And when you look through it, you'll see that we got exactly what we wanted as far as ownership was concerned. So you got 1% Barrett, 9% Green, 7% Russell, and 5% Randall. And then you have to ask, how many people had all 4 of these guys? And the answer is not that many. We got Kevin Love at 14%, which was really fortunate because remember, as I talked about yesterday in the preview, before the Middleton and Bledsoe value emerged, Kevin Love was probably going to be the highest owned player on the slate. But because that other value emerged, Kevin Love kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit and went off 14%. He actually could have smashed for more. And Ingles, who, again, I thought was going to be a really high-owned bit of value, again, he was just kind of left because of all the better value that came up. Now, just because there's better value doesn't mean that Ingles was not great value also. So he was a really big part of this. So this ended up really, really kicking ass, let's just put it that way. And also had similar results on FanDuel as well. I prefer to do a full lineup review when Bobby is here so he can critique and, can't be just results oriented. Say, hey, look, this did well, so I'm a genius. Remember, the idea is putting yourself in a position to do well. If you don't do well, it doesn't mean that you messed up. It just means that, the results have variance to them. And remember, for those of you that were coming into me last night saying, oh, what a great job, how'd you make those up? Remember, this was only 13% of the lineups. This was only 2 of the main core lineups that had these Warriors, and so it's not like this was by far my favorite play. But the idea was we had a plan. Eat the chalk with the Bledsoe Middleton stuff and focus on individual stack games. And we ended up, being right on which games to stack. And not all of them, but you only need one. So that was really, really fortunate. So today I'm gonna look at the four-game slate, and my plan of attack is actually very similar. This is kind of a dirty secret that I don't want to get out too much. But when you ask people, how do you approach GPPs and how do you approach the slate, what you'll usually hear from the experts, which I guess in a way makes sense, was, well, don't ask me that. It really just depends on the slate. Okay. So my secret to you is I actually do approach every slate the same. Okay. My first plan is always to find games that I can stack. Okay. Find games that have value on both sides of the equation, that could be close, that project well, that might be low owned, that I could stack together, because I do believe that the correlation of having game stacks is worth looking for. So that is always where I start, whether it's a 4-game slate, 100-game slate, 12-game slate, whether Luke is on the slate, whether Harden's on the slate, whether no one's on the slate. I really do start that way regardless of the slate. So I know it's common to say, well, don't ask me about that. I mean, it really depends on the slate. I'll always, regardless of the size of slate and the character of the slate, start with that. Does it become easier to stack games on certain types of slates? Sure. But I always start with that concept. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go game by game, and with that kind of strategy in mind, this is the way I'm going to look through it. Now, there are several injuries or possible injuries that are going to change a lot of projections and a lot of the approaches, and I'm going to do my best to address them as the games come up rather than as a overall slate view. Like, for example, the first game right here, I mean, I'm operating under the assumption, this Philly-Boston game, that pretty much everybody is in, but it is possible that that there are issues, like Al Horford might be out, okay? I think he's questionable. Marcus Smart, okay, he was actually just ruled out again. This could have just happened literally as I was loading up the thing. He won't play Thursday. So that is probably going to affect things a little bit. Maybe a decent amount, actually. We're going to get to that bit of value in a second. Okay. So if Horford would be out, then there would be bumps for all the Philadelphia starters. But I'm going to operate under the assumption that Horford is in, okay, and Smart is out. So I look on the Philadelphia side, and as far as good values go, I mean, there's really nothing spectacular. There's nothing off the wall. You have Embiid, you have Simmons, you have Harris, and you have Horford. All four of these guys project decently. So, I look at this game, and it's a 1-point spread. So if it's a 1-point spread that has a little bit of probably the most amount of overtime big you could have going into a game is being a 1-point spread. I guess that's duh, right? So I am going to give this game extra look. I would give this game a little extra look even if the projections weren't that great, as long as they weren't awful. And they actually do look pretty decent in the context of the slate. When you see the values of other players, they actually look to be pretty competitive. So I am going to look to see if it's possible to get pieces and get a game stack of this in. So the first thing I did was I loaded up, Simmons, Harris, and Horford, but I can certainly put Embiid in this mix, right? Depending how the rest of my construction works. So what I would do is probably have one build where I have a whole bunch of different Philly-Boston combinations. What I probably do is not have too much Horford and Embiid in the same lineup, because they would be kind of vulturing each other's rebounds in some sense. And I would probably try to have Simmons in most of them, because I do believe that when you are game stacking, that you should try to have the point guard in there, just because he is, less shot dependent, or he's going to pass to 2 or 3 different people who are going to be competing for those receptions, so to speak, right? On the Boston side, I was going to only have maybe 2 or 3 guys eligible, but now that Marcus Smart has been ruled out, another player comes into the mix. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys, all of whom rate to be okay values. Okay, not great, but okay. One of them would be Kemba Walker, who actually smashed last night. The others would be, let's just look at utilities so we can see them all in one spot. Oh, they're already in my lineup. So Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward, again, presuming he plays, Tatum, okay? And then there are three guys, Tice and Cantor and Wanamaker, who are all kind of in my pool of players that I'm going to consider stacking this game. Wanamaker is going to be the guy that gets the biggest boost from, what's his name, from Smart being out, because he's going to get, probably, I don't know, 21 minutes as opposed to maybe 8 or whatever he would get otherwise. So Wanamaker definitely is a big beneficiary. And at 3,100, he's going to be popping as a really, really pretty big value. Whether his ownership makes him someone I really want to make a big part of it, that's going to depend on how much ownership comes in. I wouldn't play him or lock him in or anything like that. But, I'm not going to let 25% ownership dissuade me from playing him if it fits the rest of my build. So the guy I mentioned that doesn't project all that well, that's more of a speculation than anything else, is Enes Kanter. So, again, I try not to get too involved in the basketball analysis, but you'd like to think that if Horford and Embiid are playing, that Boston would try to match up with as much size as possible. So while these guys project for, between the two of them, Tice and Kanter, about, looks like 40 minutes, I just imagine that they would find a way to have 48 minutes of usage between those two guys, especially if you're going to have to face Embiid and Horford probably for 48 minutes at some point. So I feel as though that one of the two of them, Kanter or Theis, could get those extra minutes that are not projected for, or at least, pro rata, they could distribute between the two of them. So in these Boston stacks, I'll probably pick one of the two of Kanter or what's his name, or of Tice. Now, also, as Christmas is coming up, I'll remember that one of the first times I ever played was a couple of years ago, Christmas, when Kanter had an enormous game against Embiid on Christmas Day. But again, that's a long time ago. But nonetheless, Kanter is certainly going to be in my player pool, at least to stack this game. So this is definitely one game I'm certainly going to be looking at possibly stacking. The next game is very interesting. Cleveland against San Antonio. It's got a 12-point spread, so it's typically not the type of game that I'm going to look to immediately stack. The way I would stack a game like this with a 12-point total is if there were some real high upside guy on the underdog that would be really responsible for bringing the game close, such that the studs or the high projected players on the other team, the favorite, would be able to benefit from getting those projected minutes and not worry about that blowout risk. In this particular case, I don't believe that there's such a big stud on Cleveland that could do that, especially when that doesn't project that well. Kevin Love, as I mentioned, had a pretty good day yesterday, but on a back-to-back, well, first of all, I'm not even 100% sure that he plays. I mean, he should, but if he doesn't, then we're talking about Larry Nance chalk again, but that's speculation at this point. So in this game, again, I'm not looking to stack it, but I still will look for one-offs. And on the Cleveland side, I'm looking at Love and Thompson. I mean, those are the two guys that, they're project okay. I'll probably put them in my player pool and, probably filter them in, presuming their ownership is not kind of through the roof, okay? Now I'm looking right now, and none of those guys are carrying high ownership, so I'm not too worried about that. On the San Antonio side, I mean, it's really, really interesting. So the one bit of, I'll say, news or coach speak or whatever it is that is really driving some really big value today is this comment or comments that DeJounte Murray's minutes limit is kind of off the table at this point. Pop has always been known to just be kind of funny with his minutes, especially with DeJounte Murray. And, while he didn't flat out say DeJounte Murray's getting 32 minutes a night now, people are interpreting his comments as meaning that he is not, going to be limiting him. Now, with that said, even only projecting him for 24 minutes DeJounte Murray is popping as a really, really good value. Okay. So if he has upside from that, I mean, I'm not, I don't want to give out plays per se, you know what I mean? But this is, I don't want to say lock or anything like that, but I mean, this is a really, really good play. Okay. If DeJounte Murray is going to be starting, his projections are just going to be not starting. He's going to be unlimited minutes, meaning that he can get up to 30 minutes. I mean, this is going to be a really, really strong play. Now, there is that blowout risk and all that stuff involved in it. And there's always Popovich vig, you know what I mean? Of, just because he says something doesn't make it so. But DeJounte Murray is I would imagine going to be popping in most projection systems. He isn't already, but I'm looking at some of these ownership projections on some of the sites, and one only has him at 19%. And for me, I mean, I'll take a 19% guy that's projected the way he's projecting. So, I got to think about this because DeJounte Murray, again, although he's not going to be part of a stack that I'm too interested in, he's, certainly looks to be a very, very legitimate one-off to be filtering through my lineup. So again, when I'm thinking about my plan for the day, I mean, this is one guy that I'm really starting to, he's going to be a big part of it. There's the other interesting guy on San Antonio. There are a few. I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge projects okay. Patty Mills, okay. Rudy Gay, just okay. Forbes and White, just not even that great. DeMar DeRozan is projecting to be a really good value. Really good. Now, really is very relative. He's projecting to be a good value. He's projecting to be just about the same on a value basis as DeJounte Murray. He's projecting to be about the same on a value basis as, say, Joel Embiid, although they're totally different price points or whatever it is. But what I'm nervous about is that I'm looking at him and I'm seeing that he's projected to be about 45% owned. So I don't know if I can do it. I don't say I know if I can do it. I certainly could play him, but I'm not going to be, if let's say I run optimals or I run lineups and it would spit out like a whole bunch of DeMar DeRozan. I'm not too interested in being that overweight or taking that much of a stand on DeMar DeRozan at 40% ownership. Now, again, this is why you're talking about plans and portfolio management, things like that. Don't fall in love with a play and don't fall in love with a situation. Everything is a function of ownership. Everything's a function of how the rest of your lineups kind of play out. Like, for example, if I did have a really low-owned stack that laid over the field, that I was huge amount of confidence in, that I knew nobody was going to play, then I really wouldn't worry about the DeMar DeRozan ownership, okay? But compare him, for example, to last night. So last night, Middleton and Bledsoe compared to DeRozan from tonight. Now, granted, they were 70% owned compared to his 50, and that was a huge slate. But their projections were so far through the roof relative to somebody like DeRozan in this spot. I mean, again, I'd be very, very careful about eating the DeMar DeRozan chalk, especially considering the blowout risk. Now, again, do you project blowouts? And here's another thing that, I hear, you know how much content I watch, and I've watched before I started delivering some myself. You hear it all the time, but you can't project blowouts. While you can't project with certainty blowouts, you can certainly project some type of probability that a game blows out. And you interlay one thing over the other, like if you put a player with not a high ceiling in general. I'm not saying DeRozan is that, although you could argue that. And then you also add in possible blowout risk, and you add in the high ownership. I think in that sense, you could, use blowout risk as a reason to temper your exposure to a high-owned player. So is he a good play? I mean, he rates well. He's a good median projection relative to his price. But for GPP, I don't know if he's going to be – I'm certainly not going to have 50% of him. Let's put it that way. Okay, so the next of the four games is the Dallas-Detroit game. And this is a game where we certainly have to look at some injuries. If Andre Drummond, I think, was announced that he had an eye situation. Let's just pull this up. Let me see. Andre Drummond. He's questionable. He has like an eye thing or something like that. So if he is out, then you have to just everything changes, right? You have to up your projections on certain guys. The guys who, in my opinion, are going to pop. Obviously, Blake Griffin is going to pop, although be careful with Blake's projections, because while his overall usage will increase, I think the rebounding rate does not increase as much. He's not as aggressive a rebounder as maybe he was or used to be, whatever it is. But I still think he is obviously his usage will increase, and also his ownership will increase. So you have to watch that. The other guy who will get a big bump is, I guess, Christian Wood. Christian Wood will end up getting a big bump also. So so that's something you have to look for. Right now, I honestly have no idea whether he's going to play or not. I'm listing him as questionable. I'm going to operate on the assumption he's playing for now, just because of this review. But if he is not eligible to play, then you have to change things. Before I forget, by the way, I'm just thinking about this. In that Philly game, one thing I forgot to mention: if Horford were in fact out, not only did the starters get a boost, but also those other guys that we had kind of forgotten about for a while, like who are those? It's like Ennis, right? Mike Scott, guys, whatever. All those dudes kind of get those minutes back, or at least some of them back. Even though Josh Richardson is back, the bigger guys of that, like Ennis and Scott, they could probably get some extra minutes. But in this Dallas-Detroit game, the guy who would benefit from Drummond being out is Christian Wood. So with that said, let me look at the projections and see who rates to be good values. So again, this is a tough one because it's not, it's a 113 to 106 projection, or 112 to 105, whatever that, depends where you look, but it's a 7-point spread. So it's not that close a game. So doesn't have that much, overtime vig and stack vig as a game with a 1-point spread, but it's certainly better than one with a 12-point spread. And the other thing that would be good about a stack of this game is you would know where the usage was coming from, right? You would know who was closing, and you would know who would be playing the overtime, which would be Blake and AD, and Porzingis and Doncic. So it's probably just a fair stack game, but it's certainly one that I would certainly do. So the first thing I did was I inputted the 4 top players in here, and relative to their projections also, because look, even if AD plays, Blake Griffin and AD for that matter both project to be very, very good values. And for those of you that are rolling your eyes at Blake Griffin, because the guy hasn't made value since the Eisenhower administration, okay, including for me. Nonetheless, he is popping as a really, really good value. And as they say, on a 4-game slate, you know what I mean? Like, there are only so many guys that you can go to that have really good value. So Blake and AD both project really well. And the thing is, nobody else from Detroit projects really well. So those two would be the top dogs. On the Dallas side, there's 2 look, Luka and Kristaps Porzingis both are projecting to be very similar as far as value goes. Luka clearly has the higher raw points projection, which makes his value projection even higher, right? So, but both those guys look really good, and then there's kind of a big drop. But there is a little bit of injury news that could make things interesting. Delon Wright was ruled out, I believe, which means that you could probably go to guys like Dorian Finney-Smith might be a good value if you want to stack the game, or even as a kind of a funny one-off. If you want to get really funny, you could try J.J. Barea or Jalen Brunson. I don't know which of those guys would play, but you want to have fun, you could play one of those 2 in some lineups to take some of the Delon Wright minutes. So the first thing I did was I put all these guys in. Like I put Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond, and Markieff Morris. He's another guy, by the way, obviously, who would sorry, I don't know why I didn't mention that. Well, he would be benefiting as well from AD being out. Maybe even the biggest beneficiary now that I think about it. So I put all these guys in, and what's interesting to me is you could get all these guys, right? If you wanted to. Now, again, you're probably over-correlating if you put like Blake and AD and Morris in the same lineup. normally I would say you're probably over-correlating if you put Luka and Porzingis in the same lineup, but not on a 4-game slate. You know what I mean? So I really have no problem with these guys together. And then you put Barea, maybe one of these two in. You know, I put DeJounte Murray in just because he fit. But what I would do is really I would take, you know, I wouldn't necessarily go 4-by-3, but I would mix and match, you know, Griffin with Doncic, Griffin and Porzingis, you know, AD with Luka, AD with Porzingis, maybe 2 with 1, maybe 1 with 2, depending on how the rest of the lineup's kind of filled out. And what you could do is if you use an optimizer, you could set kind of rules where, well, one way you could do is you could lock in 4 guys, right? And then just see what it spits out and see which of those guys it spits out you like. You know what I mean? You don't have to necessarily rely on the projection. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, you know what? I'm going to set a rule on whatever optimizer I'm using. I'll say, listen, I want one of the 2, Blake and AD, one of the 2, Kristaps and Luka, and just run it, right? And then what it'll do, let's say it'll spit out like 20 lineups. I won't necessarily take the top 5 lineups. What I'll do, I'll eyeball them, and I'll say, you know what? This lineup number 13, I just like better, okay? And what, you know, why are you doing that? You're not relying on the projection? Not necessarily. Remember, there is variance. Probably the difference in projections between one lineup to another in that kind of build is going to be maybe 3 points. So you don't have to blindly rely on the optimizer to spit out your top lineups. You could eyeball those depending on how many you play, obviously, and figure out which of those you could use. Or if you wanted to, again, you know, be more careful and make sure the whole lineup correlates, you could do mini stacks from other games. But, you know, I've certainly no problem with you starting with a build like this, knowing that you're not going to actually play this lineup, right? Because this is like probably asking for trouble playing all this correlation because one man's correlation is another man's vulture, right? Like you can't have all these guys get points together. You know, someone's got to be taking someone else's shot. So, but as far as projections go, I mean, you got AD, you got Blake, you got Luka, you got Porzingis, and there's enough value out there where you could play these guys. You know what I mean? It's really not that tough to get these guys in today if that's the way you want to go. Okay. The last game on the list is Portland at Denver. So let me actually pull up my Portland-Denver stack because I did make one. Okay. So again, the way I look at this is Portland and Denver is a 6-point spread. So it's not the greatest environment to stack because it's not like a 1-point spread, but it is a 6-point spread. Now people, you might be thinking, well, wouldn't you rather stack a game with a higher total? The reason why I don't think about it that way is because the higher total is already reflected in projections, right? If I'm looking for what lineup, you know, which guys rate as good values in a certain game, the fact that there's a lower high total is already baked into those projections. So if some guy is going to project as a good value, I don't care that it's necessarily in a low total game because that's already been accounted for, right? So it's not like, boy, why stack a game with a low total? It's not about that, okay? It's about stacking a game that you think could be competitive, that, you know, that the people that you are stacking against each other are battling in the right way. You know, you have the 2 highest usage starters, like in the Golden State game last night, that you have the 2 highest usage starters. They're going to be in there in the last competitive 6 minutes and maybe into those 5 minutes of overtime. That's what you're kind of looking for. So in the Portland-Denver game, there's actually at least one bit of injury news worth mentioning. 1.5. One of them is Jamal Murray. He came out of the last game, but he says that he's going to play. So I'm not worried too much about that. Oh, this is actually the wrong Murray. Oh, this is the right one. So if in fact, by the way, if in fact Jamal Murray were out, then Monty Morris would probably be a 70% owned, I don't want to say lock, but really, really disgustingly good value, which you'd have to assess. But from what I hear from now, it looks as though Murray is playing. So the one thing, if Murray was out, if he were out, it would make the spread a little lower. right? Which would also mean that would be probably a better stacking environment. Nonetheless, the other bit of news or to think about is Paul Millsap. So Paul's Millsap, I think, was listed as questionable, and he has been basically splitting minutes with Jeremy Grant. It's Jeremy Grant. And so if he were out, then I'm just looking at my notes here. If he were out, then Jeremy Grant would be the guy that you would have to bump up in your projections. Okay. So with that said, though, assuming that all those guys are in, right, let's take a look at this. So the first thing I look at is on the Denver side, it should come as no surprise that Jokic, well, maybe it would be a surprise. Jokic is projecting to be actually really, really good here relative to these other guys. Like he's projecting to be a positive value, very similar to Joel Embiid, for example, right? And when I look at ownership, let me take a look. Like the first ownership run I look at, wow, it looks like, where is Jokic? I mean, I'm looking at Jokic at 10% as opposed to Embiid, for example, at 25%. So if I have them both rated as the same type of value, all else being equal, which is a tough assumption to make, I'll go with Jokic any day of the week, right? So Jokic is looking to be a pretty good play. And then Jamal Murray, presuming he's healthy, he's projecting to be a pretty good play also. And what's good about it, again, is that these are the guys that are going to be in at the end. These are the guys that, if you are stacking the game, that you're going to want closing, and these are the guys that you're going to want in overtime. The other two guys, I already mentioned Grant. Now, if Millsap does play, I mean, I have no problem playing him, kind of a one-off throughout some of my lineups, but he's not a core. But again, like he is somebody I would throw in there. And Will Barton, he's a guy who smashed for us a couple of days ago. He's projecting just okay. I mean, is he great? No, but he's okay. As a matter of fact, I think he's close enough to Jamal Murray, where if I were going to play 4 stacks from this game, I would play maybe 3 of them with Jamal Murray and 1 of them with Barton, right? I don't know if I would go 2-2 because, I like to have that point guard in there. So on the Denver side, it's really just those main guys. And on the Portland side, here's the problem. The Portland guys are not projecting all that well. No surprise because, it's a low total game. Denver has a good defense and all that stuff gets kind of factored in. Lillard I would say actually Lillard and Carmelo are the 2 best of mediocre options, right? So I would say Lillard and Carmelo would be slightly best. And then these other guys are all okay. McCollum, Whiteside, Bazemore, they're kind of okay. And again, depending on how deep I wanted to go, stack-wise, would determine how much exposure I would get to those guys. What I might do, again, is start with the better guys like Lillard or Anthony, and then say maybe 1 stack with Lillard Anthony, 1 stack with Lillard McCollum, although that's not usually the best correlation in the world, but the way they've been staggering minutes, maybe it's not so bad. Then also maybe 1 with Lillard and Whiteside, maybe 1 with Carmelo and Whiteside. I might not do Carmelo and CJ McCollum because they're both very scoring dependent. But if Lillard, once again, because his projection is not that great, if this is just going to make him lower owned because of it, then I'm certainly willing to forgive, right, at least to some degree, his lack of projection. He's looking to be about 14-15% owned, which seems about right. So is it a great value? No. Is it a tremendous play as far as ownership goes? No. Is it a tremendous stacking environment? Maybe not. But it's certainly possible, right? So anybody else in this game? Not really, okay? And the funny thing is you usually have to go to great lengths to find this great value to play what you want to play, okay? But what we've seen is even if you want to stack these games, you can get everybody you want, okay, without making serious concessions in the rest of your lineups, right? So what you have to then do is you have to go back and look at your one-offs and see, you know, do they have upside? Are they the high standard deviation type plays? Where do I want to play those guys? I probably want to play the high standard deviation type plays in lineups that are a little safer, okay? I want to play the kind of, you know, safer one-off type plays in lineups which are a little, you know, a little more off the wall, right? As far as their stacks go. So it depends on how many lineups you play and what your approach is. Look, if you're a guy that's gonna script 150 lineups, I'm just telling you, it's gonna be really harder for you to get exactly what you want. Now, with that said, the fact that you're scripting 150 okay lineups might end up being a better EV move than paying great care to making 20 lineups, right? Because even though your 150 lineups aren't going to be perfect, you are getting more lineups with less EV each, at least in your mind, right? Because you don't know exactly what your EV is going to be, than if you went and hand-built your two favorite lineups, which may or may not have higher EV, but you know, you get more samples, and the more samples with 150 lineups, the better you're going to be. So this is what my plan is going to be tonight on this slate. The plan is the same as always. Find these games to stack and find good one-offs around them. So I am going to probably take shots at stacking, like probably three. I'm probably going to do 4 builds, okay, maybe 5 builds. One build will be stacking that Philly-Boston game. Another build will be stacking that Dallas-Detroit game. Another build will be stacking the Portland-Denver game. And a fourth build is probably going to try to go mini stacks from multiples, like 1v1 versus 1v1, okay? What I'm not going to probably do, just because I'm really not good at it, okay, is that fifth build, which is was what I like to call the go for whoever's going to get the 2 solo home runs in baseball, right? Is to try to pick the one guy from each game and not worry about correlation, try to find the best plays and just hope that they correlate well and not worry about stacking or whatever. I never have good luck with that type of approach, okay? So that fifth build, which I keep, resisting the temptation to do, might be the best for tonight. You know what I mean? It might be, if you're good enough where you can think, all right, this is the one good guy from Philly I'm getting. This is the one good guy from Boston I'm getting. I'm going to take Tobias Harris from Philly. I'm going to take Jaylen Brown from Boston. I'm going to take Kevin Love from Cleveland. I'm going to take DeJounte Murray from San Antonio. I'm going to take, pick one. Kristoff from Dallas. I'm going to pick one from Detroit. As a matter of fact, let's do that. Let's see if you can do that. One from each. You have eight teams without paying attention to salary. Let me just see what we can do. Let me just see if I could just pick my favorite guys. Let's say that I thought that Tobias Harris, my favorite guy from here. Let's say that Boston, I thought, let's not even get too fancy. Let's go with Jaylen Brown from here. I'm not even looking at positions or anything like that. Let's say in Cleveland, I thought that Love would be the best play. Let's say that San Antonio, I thought DeJounte Murray would be the best play, as I put him here. Let's say that on Dallas, let's put Porzingis, for example, in the center position. Let's say that in Detroit, everybody's playing, and let's put Blake Griffin in the power forward position. Let's say on Portland, well, now we're kind of running out of salary a little bit, but let's say Denver, let's take Will Barton and put him over here. And let's say we take one of these guys from Portland and we'll put him in here. So Bazemore, right? So there you go. Like, I identified all of these guys as being good plays from their 4 games times 2. So there are 8 teams. I think these could very well be the 8 top values from each game. Although you could, whatever, you could mix and match some of these things. But for this to actually win, I mean, you've got to be like really good. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to be really good. And when you have no correlation between any of them, I mean, look, you have 1v1 correlation by definition in each game, right? You have 1v1. But that's just really, really difficult, you know, trying to win by picking one guy from each team over 8 games, over 8 teams. So that is my slate review. And again, hopefully, I'm just hoping that what you're getting, at least from my point of it, from my perspective, is something other than this is who I like. I really, the reason why I got good at this is when I would be talking to Bobby and I didn't really want to know forget that I didn't want to know his plays, right? We would go through the games. Didn't matter because whatever he told me, he could tell me 30 guys. I'd play all 30 guys. He'd play the same 30 and he'd make money. I would lose everything because it's not just about that. It's about how to construct and how to portfolio manage. So what I'm trying to teach you guys, if possible, is how to have an approach, right? And what to think about when you create your approach. And just typical fundamentals make sense, you know, like correlation, low ownership, and things like that, rather than just give you my top 20 or something like that. Because the hell am I to know what the top 20 are going to be? If I had the crystal ball, believe me, I wouldn't be doing these videos. I would just be playing them on my own, and DFS would be over. I guess that's all I had. Again, I hope doing it by myself wasn't brutal for everybody, but hope that you all have a good night. And I guess that's it.